Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get a city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1067 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Doer. The world's most comfortable pants and shorts. Save 15% with the promo code TMDS. Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana, the lowest prices on cannabis, guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. Today, making her Toronto Mic'd debut is Wendy Mesley.
Woohoo! Hello.
And returning to the program is Maureen Holloway. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
How's everybody doing today? You're not in my basement, so tell us, where are you geographically? And then how the heck are you?
Well, I am, excuse me, I got a bit of a cold, but I'm on the southern end of Lake Simcoe, and the waves are massive.
Do you ever surf those waves, Wendy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's my thing, but I do it in an old-fashioned way. And John Kerry used to do it, so let's not go there.
I'm in St. Andrews by the Sea in New Brunswick, and the sea is calm. And I'm at the last phase of a 3-week road trip through Quebec and Gaspésie, and then I'll be heading home, I think, on Sunday or Monday, the day that our podcast starts, and should be home by Wednesday, driving through Maine and upstate New York. I just want to say, Wendy, this is what we're going to be doing. Mike is all his sponsors and all that. This, once we get some.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what the posters were, and then
sponsors.
Yeah, they're all. It's not that it's not that Mike does beer and drugs all the time.
They're legal, Wendy. Legal drugs.
They're legal. And the funeral home is a really nice touch. I think it sort of completes the whole life cycle.
One does not lead to the other.
No.
Well, I'll stay away from that one. But what a pleasure. Okay, so much ground to cover. I was thinking, I could do an episode with Wendy alone, of course. She's been a fixture on the Canadian media scene for decades. I could just dive deep into the Wendy Mesley life and times. But then, of course, Maureen Holloway is here. I could do several hours with Maureen just talking about everything. So I could ask an open, silly question, what's new? Anything
Wendy, what's new?
Well, we're about to launch our podcast. We were going to launch it on Friday, but then, as Maureen said, the dog ate it. So
what really happened there? I saw that tweet, but what happened? Did a file get corrupted, or what?
No. It was just, there's so many bits and pieces, and we are new to this, and it's not just the podcast. Although the podcast is the largest part of the project, but the website that we had to get up and now what happened is we realized that a few people suggested we should send out a press release because people might care that we're doing this. So really that's what it's about. We're putting out a press release today. And also for some reason, somebody said, and I can't remember who, because we've had so many cooks stirring the pot, that maybe Friday is not the best day to launch. I'm not really sure why, but that Monday would be better.
I feel this is to me, you're talking to a guy, and despite what you might have heard on the internet, I've actually never worked in radio. I feel like I need to tell people I actually don't come from the mainstream media like you two. I can't wait to, talk about that because now you're in this brave new digital frontier, which is where I live. Like I was born in this world. You merely adopted it.
Yes, I know. We're newcomers. We're
moving in.
I always say this, even though some people have trouble understanding what this expression means, but a rising tide does rise all boats. Like this is good
float
for
all boats. Yeah,
there you go. I'll paraphrase that. But okay,
except
so
the mainstream media, which is not doing so well.
We're going to talk about all of this. Absolutely. But a lot of what you say there about, press release and Friday, this sounds really dusty, old school stuff to me. Like, I believe that this is an authentic time, completely like an organic, authentic time. Like, you just drop the app. You don't look at your calendar or your time of day. You drop it. You do things like Toronto Mike to get the word out. You establish your social media base, and you just be your compelling, interesting selves, and then people will find you. And then word of mouth. The best friend you'll have is somebody will say, I love this show, and they'll tell their 5 friends, and they'll tell their brother and their mom, and then those people will listen and say, I dig these ladies. I love this show. And they'll tell their 5 friends, like, really, and it doesn't happen overnight, but you guys hit the ground running because you're famous. Both of you are famous people. Like, that helps.
We're Canadian
that does
famous.
Help.
Yeah,
Canadian
we're
famous.
Canadian famous. So, and yeah, I was expecting it when I was trying to talk Maureen into this, and there may have been some wine involved. I said we were going to get all of these like super famous, like Jane Fonda kind of people, and they're all going to come on, and they're all going to be like so happy to come on, even though we don't exist.
Or didn't. It didn't exist.
And things have changed a little bit since that. So it's we're getting there.
So we're going to talk a little about the podcast. Then I have some questions for each of you, and then we're going to talk more about the podcast. And what is the name of your new podcast?
Women of Ill Repute, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything that Maureen or I have ever done in our lives.
I was going to ask you that.
We find women of ill repute or anybody of ill repute to be more interesting than people who aren't.
But do you consider yourselves women of ill repute?
It's a saucy, sassy kind of implication. It's playful. Neither Wendy nor I have done anything bad ever in our lives. But there's been a certain amount of notoriety surrounding Wendy's departure from the CBC and my departure from both Q107 and CHFI. So the name is sort of an acknowledge that, you know what, there's difficulty in everybody's past. And the best thing to do if you're proud of yourself and you're strong and you're fearless is to just be a little bit brazen about it and unapologetic. And often you find that the shit that you go through sometimes opens the door to a better place. So we are the women of ill repute, and we want to talk to other women who didn't necessarily get to where they are by being nice.
Okay, so we're going to talk, like I said, at the end of this chat, we're going to dive a little deeper into what the hell this podcast is going to be. And again, I'll remind people, you said Monday, right, Wendy? So is that the 20th, June 20th? You can listen to this? Okay, exciting. So I have a lot more questions.
But yeah.
I wish you had come to TMDS. There'd be no dogs eating your homework.
Oh, that's another conversation.
Well, that's another conversation. Okay. I do want to start because this is going to help us understand how you two are, a duo here. Midtown Gord sent in this question. He's curious, what's the connection between Maureen Holloway and Wendy Mesley? So, like, how did you guys hook up as buddies?
Well, we're twins.
Sorry, go ahead. I'll let
We're
Maureen
twins. We're twins. We've only been friends for about 4 or 5 years. We've always known of each other. And our paths have crossed socially, and we know a lot of people in common. But John Moore from News Talk 1010 formally introduced us, and then we started having dinner parties, the 6 of us with our partners, or the 3 of us, John and Wendy and their partners.
Right.
But really, the more interesting thing is that we're strangely linked for so many reasons. We're in no particular order.
Yes.
We're both breast cancer survivors. We both started our careers as traffic reporters at CKFM, which is now Virgin.
Wow.
Working for the same news director who took us both under his wing, but at different times. We have, Wendy, we have short hair.
You could pass for sisters.
We could. Our mothers died within 2 weeks of each other.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In the midst of the pandemic. that's just what am I leaving out, Wendy? I mean, a whole pile
I don't
more.
know. I think that Maureen has always had a part of her that wanted to be a journalist, and I've always had a part of me that wanted to be a comedian.
It's much harder.
And which Maureen insists is much harder. And we just, I don't know, we just bonded. I mean, it was really weird that we have all of these things in common, but it's sort of beyond that, because it's, I guess it's that we're both see ourselves and admire in others when they're trying to be brave and they're trying to fight something and they're trying to be funny.
Right.
And I think everything in life is kind of funny, and if you're not laughing, then there's something much worse going on. So we had all of these things in common, which was weird, but we kind of just, I don't know, we bonded, and it was
I can see that.
John Moore. Yeah.
And okay, well, so firstly, shout out to John Moore, who I quite like, and we've had some nice conversations, and he was literally scheduled to come over and do a Toronto Mic'd episode, and I think he was leaving the 1010 studio, and somebody who's no longer the program director there asked him, like, I don't know, he told him where he was going, and he was told he was not allowed to do Toronto Mic'd. Like,
it's
this,
still the case.
Still, like, yeah, I just find that fascinating when I hear, like, John Moore is not allowed to come on this program. Like I'm so dangerous.
He doesn't do any interviews outside. I think it's a policy.
I've heard him on CBC. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I know. I don't really know. You'd have to ask him, but of course you can't.
But I'm not, maybe I like the man, and I'm glad he brought you two together, because hearing that little, all your connections, it makes sense you'd be fast friends. And also, as a guy who observes Canadian media, around the same period of time, you two veterans of your respective media channels found yourselves free agents, free spirits, like it's sort of similar timelines that now you're sort of available to do whatever you want outside the MSM.
Well, I became retired. I don't really like that word, but I left the CBC before Maureen left CHFI.
Right.
And I was trying to figure out what to do, and nothing quite made sense. And then Maureen left. And it wasn't like, I think we still want to make the world a better place. We both still want to keep laughing, and we both still want to do something. But we came together after a year. The timing was impeccable.
Well, I'm only just meeting you, Wendy, but I've known Maureen for a long time. There's a photo, by the way, Maureen. I think your first visit here, you've been here a couple of times, and you've kicked out the jams, and people should go back and listen to Maureen Holloway on Toronto Mike, because it's fantastic. But you have there's a picture of you holding my youngest when she was like
a baby.
And I see that photo because, I do this thing where on this day, on this day, this person came over, that person came over, and I kind of on Twitter, I'll remind people they can still listen to this episode, even though it might be 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. So whenever I see that come across, and it's time for that episode to be like promoted on the socials, I think, oh my goodness, that my sweet, who I watched her play soccer last night, my sweet Morgan, in your arms at that age, like forever, warm fuzzies for Maureen Holloway, because of that photo.
How old is she now, Mike?
She is 6.
Oh, she's the most beautiful baby. All your children are gorgeous.
I gotta say, and I've seen pictures of your family, also gorgeous, Maureen, but I'm very blessed. And Father's Day is Sunday, and I'm like, I got 4 healthy, smart, well-adjusted children I'm so proud of and so madly in love with. Like, all the other noise that's going on this week can stuff it, because I'm the richest man in town.
Are we going to talk about that?
Well, okay.
Do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to?
You can talk about it now. If you have any questions, we can do it now. And then I want to do a little chat with Wendy, and then a little catch up with Maureen, and then a little more about the podcast, because some interesting questions came in. But do you have any questions about Toronto Mike?
Okay, so the reason why I think it's relevant is because I've come out of a bullying situation, and I've been quite public about it recently with regards to my time at Q107, and I'm forever indebted to Jennifer Valentine for going public about it. But oddly enough, and we decided that Wendy and I would talk to you quite a while ago, but in the last week, you yourself have become the subject of online and on air in terms of podcasts, bullying. And, maybe you could tell us a bit about that, because one thing that we found is that men very rarely cop to being bullied. For some reason, they don't like to admit that they're being victimized.
Right.
But you're being bullied by, can we say names?
Yes, of course. I did.
Yeah. Well, Dean Blundell, who's the bad boy of radio, now has a podcast, is just really being abusive towards you. And then for some reason, Fearless Fred, these are guys I actually have time for. So I'm shocked and dismayed to see and to hear that this is happening. And then out of the woodwork,
Right.
Mike Bullard pokes his disgusting head, and they're all jumping all over you.
Yeah.
So Wendy, I mean, we're going to turn the tables for a second. Tell us what's going on.
Okay, I'm happy to talk about this, but I have to ask a question first. Have either of you heard episode 1066 of Toronto Mike? And it's okay if you haven't. I just want to know before I talk about this.
I haven't. Sorry. So go ahead.
I haven't either.
Okay, so this is sort of homework for you ladies, okay? So
I did listen to it. I just listened to it 2 nights ago. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
you did. And then Wendy, you got it. That's your homework then. You got it. Because even though it looks like it's a 90-minute thing and you're like, I don't have 90 minutes for Toronto Mike. It's only a half an hour. There's a extra 60 minutes that's not from this month. Okay, so the first 30 minutes of episode 1066, which happens to be the episode just before this one. So Maureen, I'm kind of glad I'm talking to you now. And again, complete coincidence. This has been in the schedule for a long time. In fact, this conversation was scheduled for early June. And then we actually bumped it to now. And then everything broke with the Derringer story. So it's just happenstance. But it is actually, and I have questions for you about John Derringer, but it is actually the John Derringer story, the Jennifer Valentine video that dropped on the Saturday of the long weekend, the May 2-4 long weekend. She drops that on a Saturday morning. Me being Toronto Mike, and what I do is I write about media and radio and such. So I basically wrote a post on torontomike.com called The Allegations Against John Derringer or something like that. And all I did was I linked to Jennifer's video, and then I linked to a tweet from Maureen Holloway, and I linked to Jackie Delaney on Toronto Mike, because a month earlier she told, for the first time on my show, somebody started talking about the alleged abuse of John Derringer. So I write this post, and mainstream media takes a few days. It's a long weekend. It took a little while for them to wake up and realize what's going on. So for a few days, for better or worse, and it sounds like I'm not trying to, I'm just telling the facts. TorontoMike.com was the go-to place to read about the allegations against John Derringer. That's just a fact. So when Dean Blundell does his podcast on the Tuesday after the long weekend, he lashes at me for piling on John Derringer, and he calls me the worst words in the world with the most vitriol in his voice. And I was actually like dumbfounded. Like, why does he passionately hate me? I've never met the man. I don't call him a shithead or a dick, or, I don't ever call him names or even like hit below the belt or anything. Like, I didn't understand where it came from that he had such passionate hatred for Toronto Mike, and he spews this into his podcast. So, of course, on my show with Mark Weisblatt, once a month he comes on for a very, very, very deep dive. It came up, and I kind of just asked him, leave me alone. Dean Blundell, leave me the fuck alone. That's my exact quote. And I didn't want anything to do with this man. I don't want anything to do with him. Leave me alone. Stop talking about me on your podcast. Then the next Tuesday, when Dean Blundell records his podcast, it's a much longer, harder hitting, fuck this Toronto Mike piece of shit, worst human in the world, because he starts to quote or reference stories that Fearless Fred told him about me, things that are so grossly untrue. Apparently, according to Fearless Fred, back in 2009, I was photoshopping photos of his wife onto gangbang pictures and sharing them via my platforms. That was the first doozy. So I hear that and I'm like, whoa, this is a little different than what a human piece of shit or a human piece of garbage. But then right away, then afterwards, he's like, this Toronto Mike is the same guy who blamed Fearless Fred for the suicide of Martin Streak.
Oh my God.
And that resulted in hundreds of abusive emails to Fearless Fred because I was perpetuating this myth via my platform. So anyways, the most horrible things. I did right away. I called my lawyer. That was the first thing I did. Shout out to my lawyers. I call him up and I tell him, he just said these big gross lies. Like, this is black and white libel. And then I started I know this is all about me, but we turned the tables here. The 3-prong strategy on this was, number one, my lawyer wanted me to do a content audit of TorontoMike.com for everything I've ever written about Fearless Fred and every comment left about him, just even though I knew there was nothing like that, but he didn't want to find out there was something about his Fearless Fred's wife or his family or something. So I did that. It took a long time. But of course, never anything. It's always about his broadcasting ability, like what he says into a microphone as a broadcaster. There's never anything personal or below the belt or unfair. So, secondly, He wanted me to try my best to get a private conversation with Fearless Fred Kennedy to let him know he's had the wrong guy for 13 years and he can stop sharing this story about me to his colleagues and friends because I never did any of that. He's got the wrong guy. I can't tell you, Maureen and Wendy, how hard I've tried for the last 10 days to get just a private, brief audience with this man. Multiple mutual friends have spoken to Fearless Fred, said, here's his number, call him. You were wrong about him. You owe him an apology. Have a conversation, unrecorded, private, off the record. He absolutely 100% refuses to speak to me or acknowledge he was wrong. And this is probably the man who's going to end up getting John Derringer's job on Q107.
Wow.
Which is an interesting side project. So,
wait, just throw in, and then Bullard piled on.
Oh my God.
That's all,
and then
right?
Bullard, who apparently is buddies with Blundell, for no apps. I've never thought of Bullard in years. Never thought of him. Never talked about him on my podcast. Never tweeted at him. Never wrote about him on TorontoMike.com. Completely forgot he existed on the planet. And out of nowhere, a third party, just a listener of Toronto Mike, tweeted at him and said, if you want to get your story out, Mike, you know, he thinks he's been wronged by Cynthia Mulligan and the justice system. If you want to get your story out, Mike, go on Toronto Mike. The Toronto Mike. This was a tweet from someone else, but it tags me in it. I wish this gentleman never did this because it somehow poked this bear who started telling me to fuck off. I kiss the ass of my guests and I'm this terrible that. I'm a pussy. He goes into my DMs. Yeah, he goes into. He says. I think I tweeted about. Thank you, Humble and Fred, for having me on the show. I produce that show, but thank you for having me on the show to talk about all this that I'm talking to you about now. And then Mike Bullard said, I'm a crybaby, a pussy, all these things, like public tweets. But then he goes into my DMs. Remember, I did not want anything to do with Mike Bullard. Never want anything to do with him. He's in my DMs over the last couple of days with threats that have me talking to Toronto Police Services now about the fact that I'm being physically threatened by Mike Bullard. Like, this is happening right now. I was on the phone with police before I jumped between Hebsy on Sports and this episode of Toronto Mike. I'm on the phone with police about Mike Bullard. I'm on the phone with lawyers about Dean Blundell and Fearless Fred. This is my week. Thank you for letting me vent.
Wow.
I want to ask Wendy a question on your behalf because Mike and I just spoke very briefly before you joined the Zoom. Do you take the high road or do you? Yeah. Do you take the high road and dust it under the carpet, or do you go in fighting?
My situation was not nearly as extreme. No one was accusing me of causing the suicide of anyone or of photoshopping people to look like whatever he's been accused of, and there was no actual threats. So for that, you have to fight back. And even in my situation, that is one of my biggest regrets, is that I didn't fight back at what had happened at CBC, that people were using me and accusing me of all kinds of racist behavior, which was not at all the case. But I was not allowed to speak out unless I actually left the CBC, because there's human resources involved and investigations involved and processes and unions, and you can't hire your own lawyer and you can't fight for yourself. And if you speak out in any way that is seen as offensive to the CBC, then that creates other problems. So for a year, I didn't do anything. I just tried to figure out what the hell was going on and to deal with my own health and my own reputation. But my reputation suffered because I did not fight back. So I think, Mike, what you're doing, it's important. It's like completely over the top, what happened to you, but you also need to, even what happened to me, I, was hoping that the CBC would actually treat me appropriately. Maybe I should have just quit and started just blasting people and whatever and hired a lawyer and paid $1 gazillion an hour and completely walked away from the company where I had basically given 40 years of my life. Maybe I should have done that, but I didn't. Anyway, I think what you're going through, Mike, is just appalling and beyond the pale, and you're right to fight back.
So that's what episode 1066 was, which I dropped Wednesday morning. And again, the first half hour is literally, because I have a lot of audio of all this. Like, I have Fearless Fred going on Humble and Fred and going off on me, and then I have Dean Blundell, the last whatever. The thing is, after I dropped it yesterday on Dean's podcast, he doubled down and called me like a loser and all these things. So he's completely like, forget owning that he's got the wrong guy, he was mistaken, and apologizing. Like the thought that he'd apologize to me, give it up, because he's just going to double down on the lies. But
Yeah.
I want to, maybe we just interweave all of our stories. I'm glad this is quite the trio here, because Wendy, the perception on the street, and I want to hear in your words what happened, but the perception on the street is that you used the N-word in an internal CBC meeting, and this has led to your, I guess, suspension and an eventual leaving the CBC, where you've been since 79 or something. Like, what happened?
Yeah, well, I actually went to CTV first in 79, but CBC since like forever, forever. So what actually happened? I was on a phone call. It was a very strange time, because George Floyd had just been murdered by the police, and everybody was rightly angry. We were also all working from home because we all thought we were going to die from COVID. So it was 2 years ago.
Right.
So it was a very, very strange time. And I was on a phone call, which is what we did instead of being in the office, where there was a woman who was going to be on our panel talking about journalism in Canada. And she was from Saskatchewan, and she was a journalist, and she was called the N-word all the time. And I was so upset on the phone call that I used the whole word, and I shouldn't have. I apologized immediately. I apologized profusely afterwards. Past history at CBC was things like that would happen and they'd be covered up. But that's not the way that I roll. I apologize, but it was used, I think, by CBC to create this whole thing about we're not racist. She's the racist, shit on her. So, I mean, that's obviously, it was a lot more complicated than that. But for a year, I felt I couldn't speak out. And I saw my reputation and my career and my show and everything else be tossed into the garbage, even though, and it became such a situation that people did not, other than Maureen and a few other people, people did not want to publicly be seen to be associated with me, even though privately they were all like, oh, Wendy, this is crazy. They've thrown you under the bus. What the hell is going on? We know you're not a racist. You fought for all of these things all your life. Like, what the hell? And meanwhile, has anyone looked at the CBC and the problems that it's got with inequality? So, yeah, I felt, and meanwhile, like I think I spent my life fighting for inequality, fighting against corruption, fighting against inequality. So not fighting for inequality, fighting for equality. Yeah, well, that's what we're going to do on the podcast, right?
Fighting for inequality with Maureen Holloway and Wendy Mesley.
No, repeat it.
You know what? You'd have a similar audience. I think the Blundell audience would be interested in that.
Possibly.
Okay, Wendy. Okay, so I have some questions here. Firstly, and I mean, this goes without saying, but I want, in your words, this is a good chance for you to correct the record, because when people hear in 2022, when they hear, I've always believed context is everything. Okay, I've always believed that in proper context, you have to look at the context, because saying that Wendy said the N-word, okay, the context is missing from that statement, but people don't usually dig beyond that. Like that's it. Oh, it's again, you admit that even in an internal meeting, you got to say the N-word, like I've been saying. You don't say the N-word. You say the N-word. It's very confusing, right, when you hear it said like that.
No. I should have, and I acknowledged that immediately, and I was horrified that I didn't know that better, and that I didn't. Because context,
I guess where I'm going is context was king, but not anymore. Like now it's a third rail of sorts. Like it's I
don't know. I mean, I actually think that context matters. Like Tina Fey, who's bigger than all of us, she had on her series 30 Rock, she had a bunch of people in blackface.
Right.
And she said context doesn't matter, it's wrong. And I agree. There should be no blackface anywhere. Right. And I should not have used that word. But I think there is a huge difference between saying that word because you're upset that someone's being called that, and actually calling somebody that. So I think context actually does make a difference. But
see, I agree with you.
But excuse for me using that word.
I agree with you. Like hearing you tell that story, it's that you're there angered that any human being would call any other human being the N-word. And in this anger, in an internal call, because you, of course, are a professional broadcaster for 4 decades plus, like you're not on the air. This is a private internal call. It does leak out in the passion of your disgust, I suppose. But once you utter the word, it gets into an HR universe, and you're pretty much muzzled in silence. When your exit was negotiated, were they fair to you at the end? Like I don't want the first page of your obituary to be, she said the N-word in an internal meeting.
Disgraced broadcaster, yeah.
Because I'll just remind the people, and I know normally when you come on, we do more of a deeper dive, but that, you were anchor of The National, you were host of Undercurrents, Disclosure, Marketplace, you hosted the Sunday morning talk show weekly with Wendy Mesley. Like, you are one of Canada's great broadcasters of the last 4 decades.
Yeah, no, there's a few questions in there. I did expect that I would be punished appropriately. But I also thought that ultimately I would be forgiven instead of being thrown under the bus, which is how it felt. So no, it didn't end well. After trying to apologize and, going through the whole process of, I can't remember what the title the person had, but the sort of the learning coach or whatever. And he was like, "You're a fucking underdog. This is crazy. Like this is nuts." And then they offered me, "We're going to take away your show and we've trashed your reputation, but here, do you want to come in and read some copy?" And I said, "Okay, I guess it's time to go." And so I tried to negotiate something that would make it a little bit more respectable for after having been there for 40 years. But I have a pension, so I'm not really complaining. I've left with a pension.
Well, you got a waterfront property. Is that what I see outside your window there?
We have 50 feet. Ask Maureen what she's got.
Oh,
what do you got there? What are you packing?
Oh, well, no, I'm not at my cottage. I'm at a friend's cottage, but we do have a cottage with 2,000 feet of frontage, but you can't get there. You can only get there by boat. So, yeah.
So no, it didn't end well. And the CBC had been accused of systemic racism like 2 weeks before at the CRTC. And if you looked at the management, like there were no black, brown, or they were all like white old people. Right. And I'm a white old person, so I shouldn't be complaining. But yeah, it didn't end well. So here I am, quasi-retired, but not fully retired because Maureen makes me work too hard doing this podcast.
And let's face
Women of Ill Repute.
You enjoy working. Maybe I'm guessing wrong. You tell me, but you're far too young to start, the gardening phase of your life.
Nothing against gardening.
No, of course not.
But yeah, no, it's nice to be able to get older and to appreciate life and to have some chuckles and have some friends and look at the stars and have a glass of wine and not have to go in and do I was pretty lucky at CBC. For the last 20 years, I've been able to sort of do stuff that I thought was important most of the time. So it was a pretty happy relationship until the end. But now I've got even more time to do more stuff with people I love, like Maureen.
Okay, amazing. We're going to get back to Maureen in a second. Joe Louis did want to know, is there any chance, Wendy, you'd ever surface in the mainstream media again? No. That's okay. You know why? Because I'm kind of sick and tired of people talking about mainstream media and then some other media that exists where when it's all the same now. Like, to me, you can have a bigger forum and a bigger voice being completely independent broadcasters in 2022. Like, you don't need the CBC.
So many people have reached out to Maureen and I, and even though very few people spoke up for me publicly during this whole thing, a lot of people reached out privately. And so I've got like quite a large network of people who are like dying to, they thought that I and Maureen did some good journalism or some good broadcasting over the years. And so, yeah, I hope that I don't need to go back to mainstream media for that. And no one's listening to that or watching that anyway.
It's a shrinking pie. Okay. Now you mentioned, Maureen Holloway, also, Maureen's on this call. I just realized I can ask her directly. Maureen, when did you show up here? I was chatting with my new friend, Wendy Mesley.
Your new best friend.
All right, where do I go with you? Last time we talked, you had taken over for Erin Davis at CHFI. I want to shout out Erin Davis because she's a true ally and become a very good friend. And I just want to say hello to Erin if she's listening. I think she might be. But okay. Maureen, you were at CHFI, but you were co-hosting with Darren B. Lamb. What happened to Darren? Because I know Mike Cooper, who recently made his Toronto Mike debut, and we had a good chat. But and he was, and I asked him the same question. But what happened to Darren B. Lamb?
I don't know. And I know that sounds like such a evasive answer, but he went on vacation in February of
2020?
He went on, it would have been February of last year,
21.
so 2021.
Okay.
And he never came back. He sold his house a few weeks later. And I believe he is living on the West Coast with his partner. And we were never, he blocked all of his colleagues on social media. And we were never told why. In fact, we were told for a long time that he would be coming back eventually, but they would not tell us why he had left, and they didn't seem to know. Actually, we had new management at the time, a new program director, and he seemed to be as confused as anybody. I'm not going to go too deeply into this. Darren B. Lamb was not an easy person to work with. Aaron will tell you the same thing. Marilyn will tell you the same thing. But we made good radio. What usually the discomfort I had with working with him was behind the scenes, and I don't think it leaked across, but I don't know, maybe he just decided he didn't want to have anything to do with any of us. It would have been nice to have a goodbye and an explanation, but he just took off. And they immediately started saying, oh, well, my PD said, give me a list of all the people you'd like to work with. And I thought, okay, well, they're going to rebuild the show around me, and that'll be great. How exciting. And I started to think about that. And they said, in the meantime, we're going to put Mike Cooper in. And I was like, oh, you know what? I love Mike. I mean, he's working with Mike was hilarious because, the first thing he did, the first show that he came on, he said, I think the gays really like me. And we're like, oh my God, Mike, Mike's 70.
Right.
But I mean, he doesn't have, he's just a pure spirit. There's never any malice or hatred. And we had a really good time with him.
And the CHFI audience already is super familiar with Mike Cooper and already loves him. So it makes sense.
Legend. So we had a good time, but Mike was never supposed to be there permanently. So I kept thinking, well, get back to me and let me know who the new host is going to be. And in the middle of all this, my contract was was ending at the end of the year. And then all of a sudden they said, well, we're not going to be renewing it. Imagine the crestfallen reaction. It's like, really? What? And it turns out that they'd already approached Pooja and Gurdeep in April of that year. So they basically decided pretty quickly, we're going to use this opportunity to clean house. And we're going to hire these new people and I do not hold, and Gurdeep is actually a friend and I play golf with him and John Moore every Thursday, but not last summer. For some reason, Gurdeep was always busy last summer. And it turned out because he knew that he was going to take over from me and CHFI told him if he told me, he'd be jeopardizing his job. So it was a really underhanded kind of horrible way. I asked to leave early. I left October 1st. And they paid me to the end of the contract, and that was that.
Well, lots for me to process here. So, okay, and I do remember this is something I did write about and speculate on, especially when Mark Weislot, when he comes over once a month for the 3-hour deep dive, everything kind of comes up. But Pooja left CP24 first, and then Gurdeep shortly thereafter, and it was just pure speculation. Because they're clearly going to show up on something, and I just thought they'd end up on television, maybe breakfast television, and maybe that is the long-term plan. Go ahead.
It's a preemptive move by Rogers by taking Pooja and Gurdeep, who were hugely popular on a Bell morning show.
Yeah,
they take them out.
Right.
And they plop them into CHFI. So that gives breathing room to breakfast television, which is a Rogers property. So it was a good strategic move. I mean, I don't fault them for that. I fault them for the lack of communication, the lack of clarity, and really shabby treatment of somebody who don't like our ratings were good.
Well, I mean,
so there's no real reason to let us go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I am sorry because yes, you're somebody in the media, and I'm sure the Bullards and Blundells will say, here I am kissing the ass of a guest again, except I legit like your work as a broadcaster. I think you're very talented, and I like you as a person. You've been over a couple of times. We've had many conversations. Like, I'm sorry that this happened to you at CHFI. You deserve better.
Well, you know what? Yeah, Wendy and I are actually very nice people that have had shitty things happen to them, and the same applies to you. So this, I think that it's very important to move on, though. You know, ultimately, you can't be bitter because we've also had wonderful things happen to us, and so you know, if you accept one, then you accept the other. And we're deserving.
And it sounds like you're financially a-okay. So on that front, there's no concern.
That's not. No, we're not making any money. We don't have sponsors.
No, I'm referring to your.
Oh, in general.
Yeah, in general, not the.
Yeah, well, Mike, I've been working for 40 years myself.
Right.
And I did make good coin towards the end. Certainly in the last 15 years.
And all that Derringer money you were receiving.
I was going to say, I got Derringer pay. I got paid really well by the people at Chorus. Certainly because I'm good at what I do, but also because I put up with a lot of shit and they sweetened the deal.
Well, this is again, fascinating that you guys are on the show today. And very soon we will talk more about your new podcast venture, which people should be checking out on Monday. But now I need to go back to Derringer. So again, the Derringer post I did triggered some online bullies to go at me, which I've been grappling with all week. That's episode 1066, if you haven't heard that by now. But now I need to ask you because, Maureen, like your first visit, not your second visit, because I got the hint really quickly, but because
I remember the first visit you asked me about Derringer, and I said he's a great broadcaster.
Yes, and I actually, okay, yeah, no, so let's, and don't worry, I'm not going to play the clip, but people can hear it. I don't edit these things, right? But 100%, I'll tell you the truth, which is, I had heard stories. Like I have friends in the industry who have been telling me stories forever, and you can probably guess who some of them are. But I had heard stories, and I don't believe in I don't out people. Like if you have to disclose it, if it's of that nature, like I'm not going to I'm pretty fair on these things. Like I'm not going to blindside you with something that might not want to talk about. But I will ask, because it would be ridiculous if I didn't. I will ask what it was like working with John Derringer. And I remember how you handled the question, which it was like screaming volumes that you said, as you just said, he's a great broadcaster.
And I stand by that. He's a very talented broadcaster.
And then your second visit to kick out the jams, I decided not to say the words. Like I wasn't going to say the words John Derringer because I got the hint. Like don't talk to me about John Derringer, particularly at that point in your life. But here we are in 2020. Now that Jennifer Valentine dropped that video, and then other people like Andrea Ruse and Jackie Delaney and Colleen Rushholm.
Colleen did not. Colleen is an employee of Chorus.
Okay, but no,
so she has not gone public.
Yeah, well, I'll go interview.
She's talked to us. Yeah,
she told Humble Howard Glassman explicitly he had permission to quote her. Like I would never out her either until she was ready, because I know she works for Chorus, but she gave Humble permission to include her in.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I'm comfortable dropping her name. But so I wouldn't do it without her permission, obviously. But can you tell us now that you're not going to be so diplomatic and careful, and I won't hear about?
Oh, I haven't been. I mean, the week that it broke, after the May weekend, Wendy. No, I was on my own on this one. I was approached by Kevin Donovan at the Star, CBC News, Chris Glover, Liz Braun. And it was funny because Jennifer Valentine and I know each other, but I had no idea she was going to do this. We somehow kind of managed to divide up the people that wanted to talk to us, and we're very public about it. I came right out and told everybody. It wasn't, Mike, it's important. He didn't bully me constantly. He bullied the two guys that he worked with constantly, particularly John Garbett. I witnessed it. Just small things like Ryan Parker who does not smoke, had to go out and and stand with John while he had a cigarette. Towards the end, he had to go to the bathroom with him. All right. So you could see all this going on, and there were racist and misogynist comments that I just that's pretty common in radio. But John only turned his fury on me once or maybe 3 times all told. And the first time I went to the general manager. The second time, there were 2 major incidences. The second time, which happened years later, I went all the way up, and they did an internal investigation, which resulted in me being moved to afternoons.
May I ask questions along the way? Okay, so because I do have questions about this, and I have heard these stories as well, but people are asking, did Q107 let Kim Mitchell go for you to...
No, Kim was at the end of his contract. He was planning on retiring. I think they did move him out. They ushered him out a little prematurely because they needed a place to put me. But the idea was that Kim was going to move on. And I think they paid out his contract. I really don't know.
Sure,
but
no.
They created a situation where it was comfortable for Kim to go. Of course, he probably had a heart attack afterwards. I had people going, you gave Kim Mitchell a heart, like me. And, I love Kim, and I thought he was a really good broadcaster, and his numbers in the afternoon were great. And I tanked the afternoons. So, I wasn't given any choice, right?
And you were with John, right? John Scholes. Did I say that right? Scholes? I always
Scholes, Scholes in the afternoon.
He's a good FOTM himself, by the way.
He's a good guy, but he wasn't, and I say this with love in my heart, he wasn't, I'm an actor and a reactor, and he was an op. I'd say something funny, and he would do this.
Oh, yeah, that's not good for radio.
Cover his mouth to hide his laughter. And I was like, dude, I only want you to do one thing, and that's maybe laugh at my jokes.
Okay, so let me step back a bit here, though. So the second time you complained and you went all the way up, I guess you're not naming names or whatever, but it's up to you. You can look and see who was working there. So Blair Bartram was the program director. Dave Farrow was the general manager. Mario Cicchini was the president of radio, and Doug Murphy was the CEO. Okay. Now throw in some more HR people and lawyers, and those were the people that and Hal Blackadar, the former head of radio for Chorus, conducted the internal investigation. Okay, Wendy, hang in there. We're going to get back to you soon. I know this might be for a swim or...
No. There's just something brewing, but I'm all good. No, okay. It's amazing what happened to Maureen.
So Maureen, you talk about, I think it was in the Star, I read it with the Kevin Donovan piece or something. I can't remember now, but you'll remind me. But you were offered, so because your complaints to Derringer, you were offered the afternoon drive and some money? Is this the...
No money. No more money. Although I was being paid morning show money.
Right.
And they put me into afternoons. A few people have accused me online of like, why didn't you speak up? I thought I was speaking up. I thought taking it to HR was speaking up. I didn't have the social media following that Jennifer had. And even if I had, who was going to back me up? And at the end of the day, Mike, and this broke my heart, is that when they did the investigation, all the people who had witnessed this abuse did not back me up.
Okay, now there's a current, I don't know if it's done yet, but they, Chorus put out a statement that they were doing a third-party investigation.
Again,
yeah. So they
hired a lawyer. This time with somebody who actually doesn't work for them.
Right.
Or does work for them, but yeah.
Okay, yes, I know. So it's a third party, meaning it's a law firm, but of course they're hired by Chorus. So Chorus will pay their big invoice or whatever. But okay. Yeah. Have you been spoken to by this lawyer? So you've talked on the record or for this investigation, right?
I have not spoken on the record. What I don't have any problem telling you this. There are files with my name on them at Chorus where I gave evidence. It was called contemporaneous evidence, meaning I reported what happened at the time, and it's there. And that should be enough for them. What do they need to hear from me now?
Right. Okay.
So that's where I'm at.
And when you were with John Derringer for years, right? Because you would do it remotely from your home office.
For the first 10 years, I worked from home, and in the last 5 years, they asked me to give up the other gigs I was doing across the country,
right,
and to come into the studio and be a full-fledged co-host. And I think it's when I went into the room that, it still lasted longer than anybody else, but it just wasn't a healthy place to be.
But were you aware of what had happened to other women who had co-hosted with?
Yes. Okay. Jackie Delaney, much to my dismay, had approached me years ago with her concerns with Derringer, but I was working from home and I'd never witnessed any of it.
Right.
And I just said, Jackie, I can't help you. I believe you, right, but I can't corroborate what you're experiencing because I have not witnessed it. I'm not there. So I do feel bad about that.
Right.
Andrea Ruse, I knew it happened to Colleen. I knew it all, but
right. There wasn't,
what were you going to do? This was long before the Me Too movement. There really was, And I was afraid of losing my job.
Well, let's dwell on that.
Out.
I'm okay. So this is what I feel, because I have this. I feel what you feel. Like I feel like you want a job, right? Radio jobs, like high-paying radio jobs, are rare, and when you get one, you don't want to lose it because it's like, oh, I got one of the high-paying radio jobs, right? So it's you don't want to fuck that up. Like that's
no.
And I
didn't.
And John Derringer, until the long weekend that just passed in May, was one of those Toronto radio icons. When I had Jackie Delaney on, I said, like, I was surprised to hear this. He's like a legend of his generation. Yeah. Like, so really, I'm not sure what would people expect you to do publicly? Like, you did an internal complaint, but are you supposed to tweet about how John Derringer is bullying you? Like, that would just cost you your livelihood, I would think, at the time.
Yeah,
you would just
and let's point out that Jen had been gone a year when she spoke up.
Right. Okay, so what was your reaction? And again, then we're going to bring it back to the podcast, but what was your reaction, Maureen Holloway, when you woke up Saturday, or at whatever point Saturday, somebody said, have you seen this yet? And you watched the Jennifer Valentine video.
I was gardening, as old ladies do.
By the lake, on your property, with your parents. Oh, no, you don't have property.
I'm just jealous, Maureen. And,
I know. I was in the city, and John and I were, John, my husband, because that'd be weird. John Derringer and I were gardening.
Right. There's a story.
Yeah, John, my husband, and I were out back fixing something, and Aiden, our eldest son, called, and he said, did you see Jennifer? I've never stopped to think, why would my son be following Jennifer Valentine? But it was all over the place, right? He said, did you see Jen Valentine's video? And he said, take a look at it and call me back. And I took a look at it, and I called him back. He said, you got to say something. You got to do something.
Right.
Because you realize it's been 7 years since I left the company.
Right.
And I just said, this is brave and true, and I back her up 100%. And there was this feeling of, they finally see that the emperor has no clothes. This is going to happen. This is going to, and then you just saw it swell. And there was this feeling of vindication and relief and some sadness, because a lot of people are going to, like, I don't know what's going to happen to Ryan Parker and John Garbett. They were bullied too. I don't know how they're going to come out of this. Great question,
because I can go both sides on this. I can see
so can I.
We're enablers and complicit, and at the same time, what would I do in that position when they don't have the Maureen Holloway salary, but they have a job in radio, which is very exciting and important for a lot of people. And now they have this job. And let's face it, I think if you went against Derringer in one of those roles, you were gone. Like this was the culture at Chorus there, that you would be no longer working there on that show.
I don't know what's going to happen to them. I wish those boys well. I kind of hurt that they weren't there for me. Garbett stayed in touch. Parker just, disappeared from my world because he had no choice. There's a difference between, they were enablers, but I don't blame them because they were victims as well.
What a story. This whole episode should be a book. Let's write.
But we don't want to live there, right? Certainly Wendy and I don't want to live there, and eventually you're not going to want to live here either, though I don't think you do.
I know I don't
think you're living here right now, but there's this stuff happened to us, and we've dealt with it the best we can, and now we've got better and bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, that's really what the podcast is. It's called Women of Ill Repute, which is a little bit saucy and a little bit of a nod perhaps to people who want it to be a nod, but it's not. It's really about how everybody tries to be brave and funny, and we're not going to try and solve all the problems of the world. We're not going to try and do the very serious journalism thing that I did, and we're not going to do the comedy show. We're going to do something in between. We're going to just talk to people, have real conversations with people, because I think that's where our heads are. And I think that's where, certainly where your audience is. It's not with mainstream media. Has just become, I don't know. It's just not as healthy and as interesting. And it's certainly not the only place to go anymore. So yeah, that's not
perfect segue.
That's not what we're going to be doing.
Wendy, perfect segue here. Because now I want to talk about the Woman of Ill Repute and the podcast. Very quickly, before we dive into that, which people can, subscribe and listen to on Monday, so it's coming soon. But I want to just thank a few people that are helping to put my kids through university and helping to keep Toronto Mike going and the Real Talk going, so we can have conversations like this, authentic, unfiltered, no editing, straight from your mouths. I won't call you horses. That sounds rude. But I want to thank some wonderful supporters of the show. Palma Pasta. Maureen, you must have got a lasagna from me at some point.
They have the best lasagnas, like unbelievable.
The checks
And I
in the
mean
mail.
that sincerely.
No, I don't think Maureen would bullshit me on that one. I believe
No,
her.
they were remarkably good. I actually went back and bought another one.
And Wendy,
You can
this is
send
what
me
you're
the cannabis.
Yeah.
well, that's a new one. Okay. But Wendy, this is what you're missing by zooming in. At some point when you return, maybe to kick out the jams, you got to be sitting right over here. I'll give you some lasagna from Palma Pasta. You'll love it. Also, fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery. Wonderful sponsors. They're going to be hosting TMLXX, the 10th Toronto Mike Listener Experience. It's happening September 1st from 6 to 9 p.m. It's going to be amazing. We're celebrating 10 years of Toronto Mike. In 10 years, you guys will be celebrating 10 years of the Woman of Ill Repute. You're invited, of course. Everyone's invited, all FOTMs. But thank you for hosting that, Great Lakes Brewery. Ridley Funeral Home, wonderful institution in this community that I live in of New Toronto. And Brad Jones at Ridley Funeral Home has a great podcast called Life's Undertaking. And I'm a proud producer of that show. Thank you, Ridley Funeral Home. Canna Cabana, they won't be undersold on cannabis or cannabis accessories. Either of you two enjoying cannabis?
Sure. Never. I have never inhaled, ever, never plan to.
Right. You can take it other ways. I'll just remind you. There's
edibles. No, I would never
edibles,
do that
oils. But Maureen, have you ever partaken in the cannabis?
Yeah.
Yeah, no shame.
Really
I smoked a joint on Toronto Mike last 2 weeks ago.
I have never been high on air, though that would be interesting.
But now you can do that. Maybe you can't do
Yeah.
that on terrestrial radio, but you could do it on your podcast.
No, I'm a supporter.
But send free samples anytime because
Yeah.
I'm open-minded.
Wendy, I get high with you any day. That would be amazing. Okay, so
it's great. Not that Wendy does get high, but
I get Wendy's more of a wine gal. That's the feeling.
Wendy goes, no. Wendy is a good time girl as much as any of us are.
So thank you to stickeru.com. When you guys get your Women of Ill Repute logo made up, the stickers, go to stickeru.com, upload the image, and get these stickers and decals. It's wonderful. And last but not least, I've been looking fly AF lately because I've been wearing my Doer pants and shorts, the world's most comfortable pants. And even my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, I'm going to her high school graduation next week. I missed my oldest high school graduation because they canceled it due to COVID. I'm still angry about it. I'm like, but now I get to go to one of my kids' graduations, and she wants me to look good. So I told her I'm wearing these Doer pants and this Doer shirt, and she says, Dad, she gave me the thumbs up. She says, I'm going to look great. So thank you, Doer. Anyone listening could save 15% right now in the retail store on Queen Street or online at doer.ca. Go to use the promo code TMDS. Okay, Woman of Ill Repute. I know you touched on it here, Wendy. I'm trying to visualize it. I'm going to hear it Monday, but is it like, do you have guests? Is it you two just shooting the breeze? Are you talking about topical news stories? What is this podcast?
Yeah, we thought we knew what we were doing, and basically came up with the idea that we would write an intro where we kind of futz around, and then we would do a bio of the person, and then we would do the interview with them, and we'd maybe do a minor trim, but more or less leave it as is, and then we'd close the mic, and then we'd shit all over them. We'd say, "Oh wow,
I love it."
I'm kidding. Most of the time we would say, "Wow, she was so amazing.
Her. Yeah.
I wish I'd asked her something." And then halfway through, we realized this is weird. Like, why don't we let them listen to the intro? So halfway through we changed, and they're sort of going, ha ha ha, or no, but at least they're on. So we're learning.
Sure.
And we're hoping to get, we're hoping to get lots of sponsors. So I'm just looking at your posters right now.
Well, so this is my 1067th episode. So without a doubt,
Did it take that long?
Now,
Oh dear.
Well, I should point out, I wasn't famous. I never worked in broadcasting, so I literally started from scratch and figured out what it was. And it did take, I will be honest, it took me about 60 episodes to figure out what Toronto Mike was. And then once I could see what it was, now you'll see, like we're doing it now, there's no editing to this episode. You're getting the intro and outro. It's all live. Not a stitch, not a second. Completely, I like the authentic feel of it. And YouTube being such pros, like you don't need to worry about like overproduction on the Woman of Ill Repute. You guys can just do your thing. Am I wrong?
Well, that's that. No, you're not wrong. And we had to learn that too. We had to, so we have 10 episodes that we're launching with 3, and then we'll drop 1 every 2 weeks, and we'll keep rolling. So we got 10 in the can. And we'll do more. So there won't be, it's not like we're going to do a season and then a break in a season. We hope to keep doing.
Well, there's no seasons in podcasting, Maureen.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Things like
I
your
know.
first batch, if you
Right.
will, or your first
Right.
series, maybe is the better word.
Right.
It's taken us a while, first of all, to learn how to dance together.
Right.
Because we're both, it's very clear, we're both bossy pants control freaks. And we'd never worked before together. Right. So that was bumpy, but I think just listening to what we've done, you'll hear it.
Right.
You'll hear that we'll get a lot more comfortable with each other. And then there was the chase, the getting guests. We were used to other people doing this.
Yes.
I mean, Wendy at CBC had, hundreds of people working.
You weren't
for
a
her.
one-woman show at CBC, not a one-woman operation, Wendy. You had
hundreds, if
Right.
not thousands of people.
Yeah, if not
I did
thousands.
start doing my own chase, but it's difficult. And
But you know
people
what?
put up. Yeah, well, I mean,
Sorry.
Maureen had people who actually wanted to promote things. I was like, "Hi, it's Marketplace. We want to accuse you of killing your
Right.
neighbor. Do you want to come on?" And they'd go, "Yeah, I don't think so."
I don't think so. So we had to identify the women. So we have a list. We have an Excel sheet with about 140 names on
Ooh.
it. Well, some of them include, Dolly Parton and the Queen.
I think Dolly would
really?
do it. The Queen would be
Oh.
quite the get. Wow.
She'd be hard to get. No, but seriously, we've got a long list of women. So we'd say so and so, and then we were like, no, they're not really. They're too nice. They have to have some sort of edge. They have to have some sort of
sandpaper.
experience.
You're looking for a little sandpaper.
Little sandpaper
Yeah.
in these women, and
Not
the
too
willingness
safe.
to. Not too safe. Let me give you an example. Marilyn Dennis, who is the nicest woman in the world and a dear friend of mine, she agreed to do it, but she said, I want to come on. I want to talk about aging. I want to talk about cosmetic surgery.
Mhm.
I'd happily tell you what I've had done to myself. She had a little Post-it note that she read from. So we were like, okay, we can have these really lovely women on, but they have to be willing to go to a place that they wouldn't necessarily go to in a conventional interview.
Sure.
And we found that as this went on, that we were starting to find our groove. And we have a stellar lineup of people. We also have a stellar lineup of people who said no, much to our shock and dismay, for whatever their reasons.
Well, we should
"What do you
compare.
mean, no?"
I feel like we should have more of a collaboration, like the Toronto Mike universe and the Women of Ill Repute. I'm actually serious. No, I know I said it off the top as a joke, but sincerely, I wish I was working with you guys on this. Like, I can see it. I just wish we had been working together on this. And funny thing is, Marilyn Dennis, who agreed to do your show, famously, when I invited her on Toronto Mike, her people told me she's too busy to do Toronto Mike. So
Yeah,
thank you,
well,
Marilyn.
She's got people.
We did weigh heavily on some friends, but we also talked to people we never met. Marie Hannon, who is probably Canada's top defense lawyer.
Right, the Gomeshi lawyer.
The Gomeshi, she's done so much more than that. She was fantastic.
Sure.
And we
And she
didn't
was
know
funny.
her. And she was
Yeah, she
funny
was
and
funny.
down to earth.
Even Jody Wilson-Raybould, who everybody
Yes.
knows
Oh,
for
yeah.
the SNC Lavalin thing and
Sure.
for standing up to Trudeau and having big fights with everybody in government and caring so deeply about fighting for Indigenous rights.
Right.
She was on and she talked about, family and why not having a kid. She cracked jokes and told stories
was
about
lovely.
Justin Trudeau. She was great. So it's just like people in podcasts, they have a chance to breathe and they have a chance to be real.
Well, that's
so
it.
It's lovely.
We also had a couple, and we're not going to name names, but you'll have to listen to the whole series that we thought would be walks in the park and turned out to be really cranky and like a couple of times rude. And
But I'm used to rude.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
not
like,
used to rude.
I
I'm
didn't
like,
like
oh.
that she was. I didn't like her. And she didn't like me.
Oh,
And
fascinating.
So anyway, it's everything. Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm understanding it's you two and a guest will join you. It's got I'm gonna just compare it to another popular podcast, which I actually don't like because I find it too safe, too scripted, and not enough authenticity. But people love it. Smartless. Okay, you've
Yes.
heard Smartless. Okay. I
Yes.
understand people love it, and I get why, because
Yes.
there's big fucking names dropping on that show. I had to listen to my man Eddie Vedder on that show, and Eddie Vedder, he ain't coming into my basement. So, Well, never say never, because Chuck D did Toronto Mike, so you never say never. But I know I had to drop that one. He's my hero.
Well, I'm surprised that you say that it's super scripted, because that's what I like about it, is that it feels very conversational and they've got their shtick. Like, I think they're like 55-year-old white guys who are talking about white guy stories in Hollywood. So it's
rich guys.
It's a little limited, but they're super clever the way that they play off of each other. So I
no, they got their shtick. I've listened to, like, I've been doing this long enough, and listened to enough where I find it scripted. I think a lot of people will think, oh, I'm a fly on the wall for this conversation. And it's very, very, very safe. If you listen, Smartless avoids all the interesting stuff. Yeah. Like, and they'll have a guest on, I don't know, Sean Penn, for example, will come on and I'll listen. Yeah, Sean Penn's saving lives in Haiti and all this stuff and whatever. But, you're thinking, oh, like these 3 items about Sean Penn, you're not asking these 3, like, because they might be a little sandpaper, as I say. So hopefully you guys bring just a bit more real talk to the game than maybe that very safe. They're not going to talk about. You're not going to talk anything about Donald Trump, for example. It's like you're avoiding this big elephant in the room. Like, okay, we're not talking about that big thing over here because we're not going to get political and we're not going to.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. Like, sometimes I'm dying for them to say to the person that they're talking to, well, then you did this really dickhead thing. But they never go there. No. Maureen and I were not really interested in having scumbags on our show, so we don't have a lot of those sort of hard questions to ask. But if it's screaming to be asked,
right?
Yeah,
it would be.
Wendy will ask it. I have
Wendy
to step in here and say, she's a terrier. Right. She is a journalist. She wants the story, and she will ask uncomfortable questions, not necessarily to put the guest in a tough place, but because she wants to hear the story. And this is what I don't even know if I've told you this one. Maybe I have. It's one of the things I love about working with her. She's really good at what she does, and I get to sit there and make jokes.
Right.
Yeah, but. Anyway, Maureen is just super clever. So there's lots of different ways of
you complement each other nicely, which will be
I think we do,
to the benefit of the listener. And do you want to tease a couple of? You did tease some big names, but my question is, hearing these women of ill repute, will you have dudes on the show?
Yes, we will. And we want to. We started off with women because it's called Women of Ill Repute, although, like we said, you can perceive us to be the women of ill repute. But yeah, we kind of wanted women, non-binary people. We didn't get any non-binary people because that wasn't the first. They have to be non-binary and then interesting. Like, we're not going about it that way. But yeah, we'd love to open it up to men, and I think we will. And I don't want to have to change the name, but we'll see. It's absolutely a possibility.
Okay, looking forward to hearing that. If a guest was coming on, let's say Sean Penn said he'd come on, but he said, but you can't ask me, I'm going to just pick something out of the Sean Penn catalog. You can't ask me about punching a photographer in the nose or something. Like, that's out of bounds.
That's what I want to know.
Right.
Yeah,
so would you agree? Because I've had a policy for 10 years. You're not allowed to tell me I can't talk about something that everybody wants. But you can't come on my show. I'm trying to think of the one example. It was early, and she eventually came on the show and loved it. But I asked Erica M. years ago to come on Toronto Mike because she's precisely the kind of person I want to talk to. And she told me she was sick and tired of talking about much music. So she'd come on, but we couldn't talk about much music. Yeah. And then we politely decided that this show is not going to happen because I can't have Erica M. I couldn't have Maureen Holloway on this program right now without asking about John Derringer. And I couldn't have Wendy Mesley on my program right now without asking about her exit from CBC after 40 plus years.
Yeah, we know that.
Would you have a guest? Would you have a guest on who said you can't ask about this? Even if it was a big name. We
haven't had that yet. Okay. We have said to people, we aren't here to ambush you, and we're picking people that we admire, maybe not completely, but somewhat at least. But we have said to people, if there's something where there's a no-go, let us know and we'll talk about it. But we haven't promised not to. And I'm having flashbacks to an interview I did with Steve Martin. And the deal was he was in Toronto to promote a Group of Seven thing. Okay. And the deal was that we talked about the Group of Seven, the art, and not about him with an arrow through his head. And afterwards, I'm like, why didn't I just freaking break the rules? Right. Like, it was so stupid. I had Steve Martin in front of me, and I'm not allowed to do anything stupid. So
I hate to bring up his name again, but I brought it up earlier when you mentioned one of your guests, but there's that famous viral YouTube video of Billy Bob Thornton going on Gian Gomeshi's.
Yeah, with Gian, yeah.
And I think the deal was, don't ask him about acting or something.
Yeah.
And the fact that anyone on that staff agreed to that. I find fascinating that, the CBC would allow somebody on with that caveat.
Well, if one thing that we did find, and I think anybody who hosts a show on it, whether it's mainstream or podcasting, is the publicists and the publishers and the people that get between you and the guest.
Right. Yes.
Quite often it's them that say, oh, do not ask so-and-so about this. And, and then I remember years ago interviewing Lindsey Buckingham and the from Fleetwood Mac.
Right.
And the record rep said, do not ask him about Stevie Nicks. She had just had an overdose or something. It was a long time ago.
Right.
And so I go in there and we're talking about this and that. And he brings it up. He says, well, Stevie's got this ongoing, she's fighting the good fight. She just had an overdose. And I'm like, okay, well, apparently it didn't come from you. So, like Wendy said, get in the situation, feel it out. And if you have a question, then ask it. The worst they can do is go Billy Bob Thornton on your ass.
Right.
I did an interview with Idris Elba, and I was told, do not ask. It was during the period where he was being talked about being the next James Bond.
Right.
And I would do not ask him that question. I was like, whatever, didn't hear that. So we do the whole interview, and he promotes whatever he was promoting at that time. And he was so nice and so natural. And he actually listened to questions. He was actually not like a lot of Hollywood people that were not like that. So I asked him about the James Bond thing, and he was completely open, and he made a joke about being a black guy, being the first, the non-white James Bond. And it was all great. So I think sometimes it's whether or not you make the promise. We haven't made the promise yet.
No, we're not making the promise.
And I love hearing that, he's a good dude, because Idris Elba is Stringer Bell in the greatest television show I've ever seen.
The Wire.
Love The Wire. My goodness. Okay, so one more question. By the way, you guys have been fantastic, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this. And Wendy, you're now an FOTM. That means friend of Toronto Mike. So congratulations.
Wow, thank you.
Maureen already had her stripes or her badge of honor there. But
it's always a pleasure, Mike. It really is.
When I said you guys were coming on, a lot of people, talk about Derringer and what happened with Wendy there at CBC, of course. But there's another question that kept popping up, and I'm naturally curious too. So we opened by talking about my story. I've been relentlessly bullied by Dean Blundell for years, and you can go listen to episode 1066 and hear exactly the vile and the vitriol that he spews at me unfairly. It's really gross. Like, if you listen to it, it would gross you out. I promise you that. So one question I kept getting is, and I want to hear from you ladies, you can clear the air on this and explain it, but Mystery Fan, for example, writes in, why are they associated with Dean Blundell? And then YYZ Gord writes in and goes, I am legitimately interested in the origin story of their podcast and how they ended up on the Dean Blundell podcast network. So straight up, ladies, again.
We're not.
Yeah,
we
okay.
Are not.
So explain where the confusion comes from, because I've dug into this, and I'm not going to pull punches, but I have seen on Broadcast Dialogue and elsewhere a press release about the merger of the Sound Off network and the Dean Blundell network, and they're touting and celebrating this. So if you're on the Sound Off network, you're on the Dean Blundell network, and vice versa. Like, I have read these with my own eyes, but I want to hear your voices on this one.
I'll let Maureen handle this one. As far as I'm concerned, I have nothing to do with Dean Blundell. We're working with Matt Kundle at Sound Off Productions.
That's exactly what I would echo. Matt is an old friend. He's a wonderful source of all things radio, now podcasting. He has guided us through this. He has a business association with Dean, but the two entities are completely separate. All of this surfaced after we agreed to be with Matt. But that being said, Matt is standing by us, and we're standing by Matt.
Okay.
And the two have nothing to do with each other. And whether Matt continues his association with Dean is his decision, but it doesn't. Our podcast will not be advertised or promoted on Dean Blundell's network, and conversely.
And Matt has told you this because Matt made a lot of noise about the merger of these networks. This is what, because I'm not inventing this. I don't know Matt at all, except it sounds like he's good to you, which means I like the man. But
yes, he's good to us.
If he has any kind of ethics or morality or good sense from a marketing standpoint, he might want to divorce Dean Blundell's network, especially because this perception's out there because of that we've merged our networks and then seen that, oh, you're working with the Sound Off Network, which means we're on the Dean Blundell Network. So I would let you ladies know, whether you know it or not, you're on the Dean Blundell Network, even though you don't think you have anything to do with Dean Blundell. And that stink will be around, and I just wish it didn't exist.
Well, nothing, I know, but that's, like I said, these things happen in a certain order, and obviously we would have objected more strenuously had all this been going on, but
Sure.
we got into bed with Matt 4 months ago.
Have you asked Matt to get out of bed with Dean?
We have asked him about it, and he assures us that the twain shall never meet. But then, you know what, Mike? That's his decision.
Yes, no, I know. I'm just thinking of how it would affect the perception of the woman of ill repute.
Oh, well, I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't. I doubt very much that people who want to listen to us will also be listening to Dean, but maybe they are. I mean, that is beyond our control.
But what is in your control is the launch is definitely Monday, right? Because I know it got pushed a couple of times, but this is launching Monday.
It just got pushed
okay,
once.
Just pushed once. Okay, this got pushed. You're right. Okay.
Yeah.
So Monday, your podcast launches, and I wish you all the success in the world. Before I play us out here with some lowest of the low, because you two, we talked about any advice for me at this point in my battles with Fearless Fred, Dean Blundell, and Mike Bullard. Like, I can go to the police about Bullard, then start ignoring him, which is my plan. So we'll put that aside. But what would you do? Would you start now that I said my piece in 1066? Would you then just start ignoring and just keep doing?
Yeah,
keep
I think
on,
at this point, you've said what you had to say in the last episode, and certainly this one, and you've made it very clear online. And you're talking to a lawyer. I would just shut it at this point. Now I would not engage.
Shut her down. Did you say shut her down?
Bye.
Not smartless.
Yeah, I'm just joking around.
I know.
Can you give our website is womenofillrepute.com or womenofillrepute.ca. You go there and everything you will need, all the episodes will be there, biographies, pretty pictures, or wherever you get your podcasts.
As they say.
And
come to our website, womenofillrepute.com. There we are. There's my big
Well, no, that's what I wanted. Womenofillrepute.com. And in a moment, we're going to get your Twitter handles for people who want to follow you on Twitter. But I have to say the magic words. Shout out to Stu Stone. And that brings us to the end of our 1067th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Okay, let's start with you, Wendy, since you're making your debut. How do we follow you on Twitter?
Wendy_Mesley, at Wendy_Mesley.
Follow Wendy at Wendy_Mesley. Maureen, how do we follow you on Twitter?
At Maureen Holloway, MaureenHolloway.
Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery, they're at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Doer are at Doer Performance. Doer again, DUER. Save 15% with the promo code TMDS. Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. And Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana_. See you all next week.